You're 22, sitting across from a woman named Chloe at a diner that smells like burnt coffee and regret. The check lands at $18.60. You both reach for your phones at the exact same second, not to split it fairly, but to calculate to the penny who ordered what. She got the $7.75 waffle. You got the $9.85 club sandwich. She Venmos you $7.75 exactly, not $8, not I'll get the next one. $7.75. Nobody offers to cover the gap. This isn't cheapness. This is just what $290 in a checking account does to a Tuesday night. Level 0, $0. At this level, dating is basically a logistics meeting wearing a trench coat. You plan dates around what's free, a walk, a movie at someone's apartment, the $5 Tuesday matinee where the theater smells faintly like carpet cleaner. Chloe mentions once that she'd love to see her favorite band live. You do the math in your head before she even finishes the sentence. You don't go. Neither of you brings it up again. There's an intimacy at this level people underrate until it's gone. You know exactly what's in Chloe's account because she tells you the same way you tell her. Not as a confession, just as basic operating data for two people running on zero margin. When her car needs a $70 oil change she didn't budget for, she announces it at dinner the way you'd mention rain. No performance because performance requires slack, and neither of you has any. Level 1. $50,000 saved. A stable job. 3 years later. You're 25 now, dating a woman named Erin who works in PR and makes roughly what you make. Dinner is $85 for two at a decent Thai place. And for the first time, you don't split it to the cent. You just alternate who pays and trust it evens out. This is the level where money stops being the main character of every plan and becomes background noise. You still wince slightly at a $16 cocktail, old habits, but a date can finally just be a date. Here's the actual shift. And it's not the money itself. It's what the money frees up in your head. You're not running the, can I afford this subroutine during dinner anymore so that bandwidth goes somewhere else, toward actually listening to Erin talk about her sister's wedding, toward noticing she always orders the same drink and starting to order it for her before she asks. Modest financial stability is the first kind of wealth that improves a relationship instead of just funding it. It ends the way things at this level usually end. Not over money exactly, but with money as the quiet current underneath everything. Erin suggests moving in together to split rent, a practical decision, wearing a romantic costume. You genuinely don't know if you want to live with her or just want to stop handing a landlord $1,350 a month solo. You don't examine that distinction closely enough at the time. You will later. Level 2, $500,000 net worth. You're 29. 2 promotions in, a small portfolio you check more often than you'd admit, and you're dating a woman named Natalie, who has no idea what your accounts look like because it has genuinely never come up. You drive a 2018 Civic. You split rent with a roommate you've had for 4 years because the place is cheap, the location's good, and there's zero financial reason to leave. Natalie assumes you're comfortable, not wealthy, and honestly, that's the correct read on the visible evidence. This is the level where the first real test shows up. Quiet and unannounced. Natalie's car dies. A $1,600 transmission job. She doesn't have the cash sitting around. She mentions it once, lightly, not fishing, just venting. You don't offer to cover it, not because you're withholding, but because, if you're honest with yourself, you're watching to see what she does next. She takes out a small credit union loan and pays it off over 5 months without mentioning it again. You notice. You say nothing. Somewhere around here, money quietly becomes a personality trait you study in other people before it becomes something you discuss about yourself. You take her out the night of her final payment, somewhere nicer than usual, and she has no idea it's a celebration of anything. You order a bottle of wine that costs more than her monthly loan payment was. She calls it a nice bottle. You mumble something vague about a good week at work. She doesn't ask what a good week means in dollars, mostly because that thought hasn't occurred to her at all. Not because she's holding the question back on purpose. That distinction matters more than you realize yet. Level 3. You're 33. The exit from your first real startup landed 18 months ago, and you've told almost nobody. You're dating a woman named Bianca, who thinks you do something in supply chain consulting. Vague enough to be true, boring enough that she's never once followed up. Fun fact, by the way. Fewer than 1% of Americans ever have a net worth over $5 million. According to Federal Reserve data, You have officially entered rare Pokemon territory, except instead of a shiny Charizard, it's a shell company. You still drive the Civic, though it's pushing 96,000 miles now, and you're starting to wonder if that's becoming less of a disguise and more of a tell. Dates get nicer without you announcing why. You take Bianca somewhere that runs $210 for two instead of $85. She comments once, "This is fancy," and you shrug it off as a special occasion instead of what it actually is, the new normal. This is the level where lying by omission graduates from a one-time decision into a daily skill. You're not exactly deceiving her. You're managing which version of your life gets airtime, the way anyone curates which parts of themselves lead the conversation. The real cost isn't financial, it's that you start clocking her reactions like they're data points. When a valet handles your Civic a little dismissively, you check her face. Does she notice? Is she embarrassed for you? Does it change anything? You log it. You don't tell her you're logging it. Bianca mentions once, offhand, that she'd never date someone just for money. You believe her mostly. You also start keeping a private mental footnote every time she says something like that. The way you'd flag a clause in a contract, you're not sure you can trust yet. Level 4, $50 million. You're 37. You've stopped driving the Civic, not to flex. Weirdly the opposite. You buy a clean, unremarkable used Audio 4, pay cash specifically because it photographs as doing fine, not as worth Googling. You're dating a woman named Simone now, and for the first time, the lie has actual infrastructure, a financial advisor named Walter who knows the real numbers, a separate small checking account you use for everyday spending so your card never says anything it shouldn't, an LLC set up specifically so your name isn't on the deed of the building you live in. Simone thinks you're doing well, comfortably well, not the actual number, because the actual number would change the entire texture of how she behaves around you. You know this because you ran the experiment once already with a woman named Priya. 2 years earlier, Priya found out by accident through a mutual friend who mentioned an acquisition you'd closed. You watched her transform inside 48 hours from someone who insisted on paying for her own coffee to someone casually mentioning, unprompted, how much she deserved certain things. You ended it within the month. Not because wanting things is wrong, but because the version of her that showed up the moment she knew the number was a person you'd never actually met before that. So with Simone, you run the same setup. A trip to Lisbon gets framed as a work thing, companies covering part of it. When the company is a structure you own outright, and there was no deal, just a decision to take her somewhere nice, without the price tag attached to the story. She never asks follow-up questions about your job, the same way basically nobody ever does at this level, because vague competence is the single most effective camouflage that exists. It's simply not interesting enough to interrogate. You get tired in a specific way that has nothing to do with actual work. Tired of running two parallel sets of facts in your head through every conversation. Tired of flinching slightly whenever she brushes near the edges of the real number, the real properties, the real accounts. You start privately timing how long you can get through a date without lying. The number keeps shrinking. Level 5, $1 billion. You're 41. There's no more organic meeting anyone. Your assistant of 6 years, Diane, manages your calendar so tightly that almost nobody gets close enough to ask you out by accident anymore. The women you meet now come through friends of friends who've been quietly vetted, or through a matchmaking service that runs about $80,000 a year and does background checks you didn't request, but were grateful for anyway. At this level, you sign an NDA before a third date, not out of paranoia, but because your lawyer, a precise woman named Renata, who's handled 3 lawsuits from people who technically weren't even dates, treats it as a baseline now, the way you'd install a smoke detector. The woman you're currently seeing, Delphine, signed hers without flinching, which you noted the same way you've noted everything for 15 years. Except this time it feels less like due diligence and more like exhaustion at a system you built and can no longer switch off. Your security team runs a check on anyone who clears a second date. Delphine knew going in and didn't ask why. You note that too, though at this point you're honestly losing track of what you're even testing for. The obvious tests stopped being useful somewhere around $25 million. Everyone who reaches you now has already cleared the visible bar. The real information lives somewhere a background check can't touch. Whether someone can sit across from a number large enough to be genuinely disorienting and still ask how your actual day was. You've watched other men at this altitude handle it differently. One friend, who made his money in freight logistics, only dates women who don't know who he is, meets them under a slightly different last name, an old trick that works less often than he thinks. Another guy you see twice a year at the same charity gala married young, before any of this, and tells you privately it's the only reason he sleeps at night. The one variable he never had to test. You used to envy that. Lately you wonder if it's just a different kind of luck, arriving early instead of arriving correctly. A first date at this level might happen on a boat you own, or it might happen on purpose at a diner. The same kind of diner, almost identically priced as the one you sat in at 22 with Chloe. Because somewhere in your 30s you started deliberately engineering ordinary dates. The same way a man with real money buys the quiet Audi instead of something loud. The check at that diner comes to $19.10, close to what it cost 19 years ago, roughly adjusted for inflation. You watch Delphine's face when it lands, the same way you watched Natalie's face over a $1,600 transmission, the same way you watched Priya's face the week she learned the real number. The check has never actually been about the check since level 2. It's the only diagnostic tool you still trust. Here's what nobody tells you on the way up. The number changes everything about how dating operates. Who approaches you, what gets verified, what gets hidden, what infrastructure sits between you and another person. What it does not change is what you're actually looking for, which turns out to be the exact same thing you were looking for across an $18.60 check with Chloe at 22. You wanted someone whose face didn't change when the bill hit the table. At $0, that meant someone who didn't resent splitting a sandwich evenly. At $1 billion, it means someone who can look at a number large enough to be disorienting and ask about your actual day instead. The amount of money required to test that has gone up by roughly 9 orders of magnitude. The question itself never moved an inch. Delphine reaches for the check at the diner before you can, an old habit from a life you know almost nothing about because you haven't asked yet, and pays cash for both of you. $19.10 plus tip. No phone, no math. The way Chloe once split a sandwich down to the cent because $7.75 was a real number to her. You watch her do it the way you've watched every woman do it for 19 years, except for the first time and longer than you can clock. You're not entirely sure what you're watching for anymore. Maybe that's the actual answer. Maybe the test was never about finding someone who'd pass it. Maybe it was about getting tired enough for long enough to finally recognize the answer the moment it stopped feeling like a test.